Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the African House. We are getting situated to get started. We do appreciate your patience. It's a historical day, you will all agree with me, once we unfold what is about to happen. I will get started so that we can keep moving on this great occasion. Excellencies, distinguished sons, daughters, and esteemed friends of Africa, welcome to the first ever hosted HBCU Africa Homecoming Media Launch. My name is Remy Duyile. I am going to be your mistress of ceremony for this august occasion. I stand before you as a serial entrepreneur, owner of an international consulting firm, and the board chair of the Pan-African Diaspora Women Association, the one of its kind that has been moving and shaking things since the inception of our great leader, Madam Ambassador Chihombori Quao, our delectable leader who has made the voice of the diaspora matter in all areas of life. I am grateful and honored to be your MC today. We're going to start this historical afternoon by singing two anthems. I know you're wondering why two. Yes, there will be two anthem songs. One will be the African Union anthem, and the second will be the Black National Anthem. And yes, you do not have to worry. The words will be right before you, so we can sing along or just watch the words as it goes on. Please kindly note, the words will be there. You can sing with them, or you can just stay and honor that. Please let us rise and enjoy as we sing the two anthems.
Liberty. God of our silent years, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places our God where we met thee. Lest our hearts drunk with the wine of the world we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
We may all be seated.
On the front lines. Sometimes.
Okay, all right. I would like to call Mr. Eric Gertrude, award-winning serial entrepreneur and institutional investment manager, to come up and introduce Madam Ambassador Chihombori Quao to each and every one of us. Let us give him a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Dr. Diwuli. Very kind of you. Before I introduce our august host, I'd like to say a few words about the diaspora, being a diaspora myself from Guinea-Conakry. This is a momentous time for Africa, for the diaspora. We have achieved so much, and yet there is so much more to achieve. Just a few days ago, we passed and are continuing to pass the Africa Free Trade Agreement, which will galvanize intra-Africa trade and set us on a path which we have not achieved in so many centuries. Economic growth among all of the continents, Africa is leading in terms of economic growth. As other continents slow because of trade wars or other types of activities, Africa is registering between a 3 and 6% growth rate and continuing on that path. We've achieved even more. We've elected a Kenyan-American president of the United States, and he now stands as the standard bearer of quality when it comes to good governance in the White House. As we gather here today to celebrate HBCU and AU homecoming, I'd like to put a few words in about the power that rests in your hands as members of the diaspora. I've seen this with other diasporans. My business is, in fact, to galvanize diaspora on the finance end, but I've seen diaspora achieve so much for so many countries and so many continents, and I think you should be cognizant of the power that you have to transform, in part because of the privilege you've had through the education, the unique education experiences that you've had, to actually bring those tools to the continent, working with your brothers and sisters back home who themselves are also galvanized to make change. And I think you cannot find a moment in the past, aside from independence, where this opportunity exists. And I actively encourage you to do so. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome a person that I have felt deeply fortunate to know, and I've actually told her this. When I first saw her speak, I said, I've been waiting for you since Sekou Touré passed away. And she has not only stepped into those giants of Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, and others of the independence movement, she has actually filled them so much so that we have to bring new shoes for the kind of presence that she has. I'd like to welcome Her Excellency Ambassador Chihombori Quao. As a Francophone, I have to be very careful how I pronounce that. Ambassador.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to your home, the Great Africa House right here in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. To the presidents who are sitting at the podium, I want to take a moment to thank you for taking your time in your busy schedules to come and join us on this momentum occasion. To my sisters, Chairman of President of NAFIO, thank you again. This was last minute, but you had the call and you answered and you jumped up and you are here today. To my sister, Ms. Jensen, to my brother, Kojo Yanka, some of you, I have to give a shout out. He's writing a book titled From Jamestown to Jamestown. I can't wait, it's gonna be a thriller. To all my other diaspora sisters, members of PADIA, members of PADWA, we truly are grateful for you taking the time to come here today. Roland Martin back there, this is my first time to see you in person. A lot of people don't look the same on television as they are in person. I have to say, you look exactly like what I had expected you to look like. Thank you for taking the time to come here. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed an honor to stand in front of you this afternoon to celebrate this momentous occasion. And of course, I always forget my husband, Sab Quao. He's sitting somewhere back there. Sab, raise your hand. Everybody's looking. A friend of mine reminded me, because I always call him, he's an old shoe that is very comfortable to wear. And so a friend of mine called this morning and said, so how is the old comfortable shoe? And I said, still very comfortable. Thank you all again. And my sister Remy, Chairman of PADWA, thank you again for also always being there, ready to step up and do your part as we come together to uplift our motherland. I took office 2.5 years ago as a dumb, ignorant family physician coming from Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I had no idea what I was going to be doing in Washington. As a matter of fact, I actually felt kind of funny and silly, thinking me, a medical doctor, can be a diplomat. But be it as it may, singularly, the one thing, I came here, by the way, with no plans of staying. I was coming here, top 6 months. After 6 months, look at my husband, honey, I tried, it didn't work out. Look at the chairman of the African Union who had appointed me. Thank you, Madam Zuma, it was great, but I could not do it. But 5th month into this position, one issue that kept coming to me and became very apparent was the disrespect for the African. I knew it existed, I just didn't understand the depth and the profoundness of it. And not only that, as I began to understand it even deeper, I began to also understand its economic implications when it comes to how we are perceived on the world stage, how this simple fact of simply disrespecting the African had serious implications and is at the root cause of why Africa is not able to move forward. And as I went and tried to understand and dig further to say, what is it about us as black people around the globe? Why is it that we are so disrespected no matter where you go? And I often say, was there a memo sent out to say wherever you go, if you are not a black person, you see a black person, you're automatically superior to them, and you have a right to disrespect them? This memo did not miss anybody. It went to non-black people, but here's the real shocker. It also went to us black people to say, accept that you are inferior. You automatically take an inferior position. And I'm going to have to tell you something that has become a realization that and this is where I am stuck as I try to understand, how did this message just go through and percolated so through? Now we are on automatic pilot. It's almost as if we've undergone a genetic mutation. We don't even have to be told. We pass it on to our children. Have you ever wondered, of all the colors on earth, why were 2 colors chosen? Black color and white color. Follow me on this one. You take a white color You're associated with Jesus Christ. You're associated with the angels. You're associated with purity and everything wonderful and everything desirable. And then you take a race that's not even white and you say you are white. Yes. And then you take another color. You're associated with the devil. You're associated with everything undesirable. I've never seen a bank robber wearing a white mask. All the villains on movies are black. Everything undesirable is black. And then you take another race that are not even black and say, you guys, you are black. Yeah. Now go at it.
Speak, my sister.
As we black mothers are trying to raise our children in our own homes, as much as we try to tell them that you're black and you're beautiful, guess what? The minute they step outside the door, the messages are completely different. A barrage of subliminal messages telling our children that that which you represent is horrible. Yeah. How do we fight against that? How do I tell my granddaughter that you're black and beautiful, but the world tells her otherwise? The voices echoing her blackness as a symbol of everything undesirable are much, much louder than even we black mothers, we come together, we can never drown those subliminal messages. They were all by design. Let me take you to the beginning. Certainly for Africa, your continent. Because as we gather here today, as we try to strategize, as we try to create those linkages between those Africans away from the continent and the Africans on the continent, we must understand, how did we get here? And for Africa, it starts with that monumental decision when the colonizers, came together in Berlin in 1884. And let me say, prior to 1884, they were coming to Africa in a haphazard way. They had started with slavery. And then when they felt like they needed the slaves to stay on the continent, they say, oh, we no longer believe in slave trade. Let's stop it. No. It was really just another way of saying the labor is needed on the continent. Let's keep the monkeys on the continent so we can continue to exploit them. So 1884, they met in Berlin to organize themselves so they can effectively loot from the monkeys. They did not meet in Berlin to see to it that Africa would prosper. No. Let me repeat. The colonizers met in order to see to it that your Africa, our Africa, and her children, not only on the continent, are forever defeated and dominated. That was 135 years ago. The manner in which they did it, they took out the map of Africa while the Africans were sleeping, minding their own business. Started to chop up your continent into the tiny little countries that we see today. The bigger and more powerful a kingdom was, the more countries that came out of it. Not only more countries, but these countries were given to different colonizers who spoke different languages. Let me bring it home for a second. Pretend you're driving from Zambia, you're speaking English. Pretty soon you are in Angola, you're speaking Portuguese. Then DRC, French. Equatorial Guinea, Spanish. Southern Cameroon, French. Southern Cameroon, English. Northern Cameroon, French. You are now in Nigeria, English. Hello. These were the same people. Prior to 1884, we were powerful, amazing kingdoms with well-established educational and religious systems. If the truth be told, we had the civilization. We were the civilized. They were the devils, the uncivilized ones. They set out to take everything that symbolized civilization in Africa. To this day, they're still refusing to give up those relics. If those relics were not that good, why are you keeping them? We were way ahead of them in our civilization. They set out to destroy us. And Berlin Conference put the nail on that coffin. So they gave Djibouti the same sovereignty as the United States. They gave Burundi the same sovereignty as China. They gave Togo. You see, the EU realizes individual little countries, they can't survive on the world stage. So they come together as the European Union. Now picture this now. So they cut up this Africa into the tiny little countries, small economies that could never survive on their own, but gave them the same sovereignty as the big boys. So that way, when the little bitty countries go to the world stage for the purposes of development and discussing trade, they're wannabe boxers who are being thrown into the heavyweight boxing ring every day. How do you put China in the same boxing ring with Eswatini? Eswatini has 1.2 million people. China has 1.4 billion people. And you put them on the same stage and say, go at it, negotiate. Are you with me?
Yes.
This is insanity of the highest order. How have we allowed this carnage to go on? When Eswatini is thrown in the same boxing ring with China and Eswatini collapses before Eswatini even gets on the stage, the world says, well, Eswatini, what's wrong with you? Why can't you take care of your people? Well, China came in and said, Eswatini, give me all your gold or else. And if Eswatini does not agree, they just go on next door to Lesotho and give Lesotho an extra $1. And if Lesotho doesn't take it, they just jump on to Togo, Central African Republic. It was all by design. 1884. They did something else in addition to chopping us up. They also set out to make the African believe that everything African was bad and undesirable, and everything Western, particularly French and British, was more desirable. We call that the legacy of colonization. Prior to that, they had started long working on the slaves. Make them think everything about them, forget anything about Africa. Where you come from is a horrible place, diseased and dying people, constantly at war with themselves, uncivilized. Cut out any communications with them. You need to just know what we tell you. And we call that the legacy of slavery. So that's where you look at where we are today. 135 years later, a system that was put in place to see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated, that Africa is forever exploited, remains in place today, alive and well. And we sit here and we ask ourselves, why isn't Africa moving forward? Why does Africa continue to be taken advantage of? Well, I'll tell you why, very simply. Until Africa comes together as a continent speaking with one voice, one continent, one people, nothing, and I repeat, nothing is gonna change. As individual little African countries, we are wannabe boxers. We will never make it fighting against the heavyweights. We must speak with one voice. Yeah. And this is exactly what our Pan-African leaders wanted to see happen in 1963 when they came together in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. They clearly stated that Africa for the Africans at home and abroad, and that African Union was now. They said Africa must speak with one voice. It is the only way for Africa to take its rightful place on the world stage. Sadly, when they went to Addis Ababa in 1963, they were divided. We had two factions, the Casablanca group and the Monrovia group. The Casablanca group were saying Africa for the Africans at home and abroad, and African Union now. This was Ghana, Guinea, Mali, Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. only 7. The other 25 of the 32 who attended were the Monrovia group. They were the nationalists. They said, let's go slow. Let's kind of wait on this Pan-African thing. 55 years later, 56 this year, we're still going slow. As if it wasn't bad enough that we were divided up into the tiny little countries that we are today. The gift that Berlin Conference gave us. One other thing that France did between 1958 and 1961 in the name of giving us our independence as African countries. France forced the Francophone, and I hate that terminology. There is no such thing as Francophone, Anglophone. They made it up. But for the purposes of communication, I will use that. 14 of those countries, they said, in order for you to get your independence from us, you must sign this document. You thought they could have found a better name for the document. The document was called the Pact for the Continuation. I repeat, the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. We are talking about giving you independence, but sign this pact for the continuation of colonization in a different format. And I'm going to highlight some of those issues that they said you must agree to if you are going to be independent. Hello. Maybe we need to redefine the meaning of independence for the French. First, France said, you see, you monkeys, you don't know how to manage your money. We're going to demand that you deposit 85% of your bank reserves with the French Minister of Finance. Under the French Central Bank, under the control of the French Minister of Finance. France is then going to take your 85% bank deposits from each and every one of you. Deposit those funds in the French stock market under the French name. And you may or may not know the returns. Today, as we speak, the latest figures are saying for every 14 billion that France invests in the stock market from Africa, they are realizing upwards of 300 billion in return. Every year, year in, year out, because of these deposits from the African countries, France is taking out of Africa over $500 billion. Now figure it out. For every 14 billion, the returns on the investment are over 300 billion, and they are taking over 500 billion. So in actuality, France is taking out of Africa trillions of dollars year in and year out. From us poor people, Africans. Back to the pact. So should you want to access some of your money that you have deposited with France, you have to submit your country's financial returns. And if approved, you get to get it as a loan. You can only access up to 20% of your money year in, year out as a loan at commercial interest rates. Your own money. As if that was not enough. They said all your minerals discovered, yet to be discovered, all your oil discovered, yet to be discovered. France and French companies have the first right of refusal. If there's anything left over that the French companies do not want, your people might have. To this day. They said you will only use the currency that we created for you because you're special Africans. We call it the CFA. There was the Central African CFA and the Western African CFA, same animal. And that France is the only one that can print it for you. 1958. Fast forward. They're still printing it for us. And if you start misbehaving, they just stop printing your money. And your country's in trouble. They also said your language of instruction shall be French, whether you like it or not. That France will have military presence in your country. that your military can only be trained by France, that you can only buy military equipment from France, that you cannot have any military alliance with your neighbor, and that in the event of war, your allegiance is only to France. And furthermore, because they have military presence in your country, they can invade you without notice should they feel that the interests of France in your country are being violated.
Teach, sister, teach. Speak on, sister.
Fast forward, 2019, nothing has changed. The same people who have the audacity to tell us that we are poor countries, they are taking trillions out of Africa every year. And what is the African doing? Like an obedient, programmed black man, we just give in. We know the facts, but we just do nothing about it. Now, you have to say some of the fears are real, because if France that has sold you inferior equipment to theirs, France that has trained your military to be inferior to their military, they are now in your country. They can invade you. They have the permission to do so. They can destabilize you. And then one might say, why is it that African leaders haven't done anything about this deplorable situation? Well, let me tell you, my brother and sister, they have tried. Documented to this day, 22 coups where leaders were assassinated. France had something to do with it. The first 7, when they decided they were pulling out of the CFA and that they're going to print their own money, they were assassinated. Every time an African leader has tried to do what's best for their country, they were assassinated. Majority of them aided by France. It's a known fact. And then others, they were just mercenaries who felt that when there was a natural resource discovered in one country, they wanted to create a coup. So while the country is thrown into a civil war, they're siphoning the natural resource. We know of one particular story that had we not known about it, it would have been, oh, there we go again, the Africans. In about 25 years ago, a group of young, rich white kids were having fun in Cape Town. They found out that there was oil in Equatorial Guinea that had just been discovered, and they wanted it. So they set out a plan to have a coup in Equatorial Guinea. So while the Guineans are busy fighting a civil war, they will be siphoning the oil. But they made one mistake. There were 2 planes. One was to leave South Africa, stop in Zimbabwe, pick up more ammunition on their way to hunt in Equatorial Guinea. Another plane was taking off in the Caribbean that had this puppet Diaspora who was supposed to be the next president. Mugabe wondered why such young people needed such powerful ammunition to go hunt in Equatorial Guinea. In doing his research further, he found out that this was a coup in the making. He allowed them to land in Zimbabwe. They loaded their plane, and just before takeoff, they were all arrested. The ringleader of that group was none other than the son of the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Margaret Thatcher. She had to fly to Zimbabwe and paid handsomely to get her son out. The last one of those prisoners left Zimbabwe about 6-7 years ago. Had these young people succeeded, it would have been another coup. There you go, the Africans again. Such, my brothers and sisters, is the story of your Africa. They don't do coups anymore. They simply create instability. So when you hear of an instability in an African country, ask yourself, what is really going on? Because what they are telling you is really going on is just a shiny object. The real issue is over here. And you need to stop before you start being used as an instrument of your own self-destruction. They want to throw to you, oh, African leaders are corrupt. I just love that buzzword. Remember what I said, we need to define some of these words for them. Do you really want to know what corruption is? I like like to think as black women, and we're going to talk about us black women here. We're smart people. There are two thieves. One is carrying a briefcase with $50 billion, which is what they say, gets out of Africa every year for corruption. And by the way, they only tell you the 50 billion gets out of Africa. They don't tell you where it's going. You see, corruption is a team sport. We want all players. We want all players to come to the table. Okay, fine, we give it to you. 50 billion is going out of Africa. And then there's another thief over here with a briefcase with 500 billion. Sisters, which one should we go after first? Wow. They want us to spend time. I am not saying we should not talk about corruption out of Africa. Don't get me wrong. Yes, we must talk about the thief carrying the $50 billion, but we must also not forget the thief that is carrying 500 billion. And by the time that thief is done investing that 500 billion, we're looking at trillions out of Africa. Now, do you see how quickly the 50 billion becomes the larger crumb under the table? And they're busy pointing at you. Oh, you see your brother, he got the bigger crumb under the table. I'm like, hell no, I want to be on the table. Don't get me stuck in the mud under the table when the real issues are on the table. We are not even on the table, my brothers and sisters, to tackle the issues that truly matter for our Africa. We must realize that. Let's refuse to fight over which brother got the bigger chunk under the table. That's right. We want to get on the table. That's right. And the only way for us to get on the table is to understand our circumstances, is to understand how we got here, to see our Africa with 2020 vision. So we, the beautiful, intelligent, sophisticated, highly adaptable, and totally indestructible Africans can do what we need to do to move our Africa from the doldrums where we were left by the Berlin Conference, from the losing lane that we were left in by the Berlin Conference, into the right lane, where we can truly look at our issues and address them as Africans for Africa. So all is not lost, my brothers and sisters. The wishes of our Pan-African fathers from 1963, March last year, the African leaders got together and signed a decision that is now putting us on the path to finish the unfinished business of the Berlin Conference. They signed what we are now calling the African Continental Free Trade Area, where Africa is now going to negotiate as a bloc, as one continent, one Africa, one heart, one soul, one mind. Yes, sir. 52 African heads of state signed that agreement. We only needed 22 to ratify. Exactly 13 months later, this is something that the colonizers were laughing at us. You Africans, you'll never put this through. This CFTA thing, you'll never get the ratifications. Years down the line, it's never going to happen. It's going to be a piece of paper in a drawer somewhere, because the reality is ratifications, my brothers and sisters, do take a long time. They take years. But guess what? 13 months. April this year, the 22nd ratification was deposited to the African Union. We're now sitting on 23 and more are coming. Because you know what? The sleeping giant is rising. The sleeping giant has found her teeth, and you recognize, let me underscore, the sleeping giant has found her teeth. Yes. Her teeth. Yes. Game is over. When I speak to businesses in this country, my mandate is to see to it that Africa and the United States are the best partners the world has ever seen. America, the United States, and the Americas is the only region that has a heritage connection to Africa. And it is for that reason, in particular, that I'm on a mission to see to it that the marriage between Africa and the United States is the best marriage the world has ever seen. It is a marriage that's going to give birth not only to many children, but many beautiful children. I'm a woman on a mission.
Yes. Yes.
And that's why. That is why it is important that we begin to understand each other. That the misconceptions, the misunderstandings, the Africans don't understand the Americans, and the Americans don't understand the Africans. Our Caucasian brothers and sisters come to the negotiating table on a high horse. To them I say, get off your high horse.
Yes.
And we come to the negotiating table feeling automatically inferior. I also say to all of us, you are just as good as anybody else. Get off that underground. You need to rise up somewhere in the middle. We must rise up, they must come down. And somewhere in the middle is where we are going to have the truly desired, meaningful conversations that are going to take us where we need to be. And this is why we are here today.
Thank you.
My son Kwame, I thank you for all the wonderful creating that bridge that's going to get us to the table with a clear mind, clear vision, understanding that when we understand each other, it is then and only then can the children of Africa take their beloved continent to its rightful place on the world stage, the place that we have vacated for far too long. But we are now saying enough is enough. We, the children of Africa, as a united front, we're going to come, join our hands, and sing the best melody the world has ever heard as we waltz our way to our motherland. Not as 55 African countries, not as 1.27 billion brothers and sisters on the continent, not as over 400 million African diaspora around the globe, but children of one mother Africa. Let's give the world the best melody the world has ever heard. You see, birds sing not because they can, they sing because they have a song. As children of one mother Africa, we do have a song. Let's join hands. Let's give that world that beautiful song as we waltz our way across the Atlantic back to the motherland. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador. Oh, my world. Wow. What a powerful speech. Madam Ambassador is a true pride of Africa, and I'm sure you will all agree with me with this statement. Thank you, Your Excellency, for your thought-provoking message of education, voice of hope, and call to action. Every time we listen to you, it's a call to action. It's not an excitement. And that's why I'm here right now to introduce one of your sons, who is the visionary behind why we're here today. And you just recognized him. And I know you're so proud of what he has done. Mr. Kwame Boateng has answered the call to action. He has taken words, thoughts, deeds into actual action, forming the HBCU Africa Homecoming as a gateway to connect Africa to the Africans on the continent. We appreciate what you have done. We're going to bring you up to share this initiative with all this August occasion people, and let's see how each and every one of us can support this move. Madam Ambassador's call is always call to action. Every time we listen to her, every time I listen to to her. It's not just an exciting thing alone. It's a push to do what next that we can do in our space. We appreciate you. You are so much of a pride to us. You give us the drive to be who we have been created to be and to stay in our space as Africans, whether be it on the continent or here in the diaspora. Thank you so very much. Without further ado, I want to bring up my brother, Kwame Boateng, the visionary, the one who has made today happen, the one who has brought this vision to play. All right. Thank you, my brother.
What a day. What a day indeed. Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you. We are here because of the graciousness of Madam Ambassador. She has made it possible. It is quite rare for a citizen-led initiative to receive the kind of resounding support that she has accorded this. We just asked for her endorsement, but guess what? She said, come launch this at Africa House. So just a little bit about myself. I'm a trained electrical engineer. I came here to the United States for college in 1998, went to Florida A&M University, and there, any other rattlers in the house? And there I found out that though I had received one of the best education that Ghana could offer, going to Achimota School, a school which had produced about 6 African leaders, that I was really miseducated about the global black situation. I experienced what I'll call a rupture in consciousness. And I was like, whoa. And as I started taking this compulsory African American history classes that we were all asked to take, whether you liked it or not, that evolution continued. And then my engineering mind set to thinking, started looking at history, making the connection between people like James Eman Kweju Agri, the first Gold Coaster I know to have attended an HBCU, Livingston College in Salisbury, North Carolina. And I believe we have some people from Livingston College here representing today. Thank you for your presence. So it was Agri, the first Gold Coaster to attend an HBCU, who came here, and finishing Livingston College was instrumental in setting up Achimota School, this school I'm talking about, which I attended. And this house of residence in which I lived, which was named after Agri. Then I found out that Agri was the mentor of Nkrumah. Nkrumah also went to Achimota School. Then I found out that Agri was also connected to Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria, who became the first president, a graduate of Lincoln University and Howard University. Then I realized that, we also had Hastings Banda attend Central State University and Meharry Medical College. I started seeing a connection between these people I call the golden batch of African leaders and the institutions which nurtured them. Then I finally looked at Madam Ambassador, Ambassador Dr. Arikana Chihombori Quao. I realized that she went to Fisk University, then on to Meharry Medical College. Then I was like, wait. I also did some batch engineering. We have a golden batch here. We need to go back and look at the conditions, the nurturing, the recipe which had produced these. And I found one common thread: HBCU, 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 HBCU. Then I was like, okay, so here we are, 400 years after we told the first enslaved Africans arrived in English America. More than 60 years after Ghana attained its independence, and a proud son of an HBCU, Kwame Nkrumah, rising up and saying the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked to the total liberation of the African continent. Then seeing how he tried hard and very hard to make sure the African diaspora, people of African descent in the Americas, were involved in the nation-building effort. People like W.E.B. Du Bois being brought to Ghana to help author the Encyclopedia Africana. His wife leading the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation within a global context to reorient the African mind. They had an agenda. They had a plan. It was comprehensive, and it was to awaken the African. Unfortunately, that was cut short. But here we are, 400 years after the first enslaved Africans are supposed to have arrived in English America. Smack in the middle of the International Decade for People of African Descent, the United Nations declared it from 2015 to 2024. A year after the president of Ghana stood here at the press club and declared a year of return. A few months after African leaders met in Addis Ababa and said, 400 years, it's time to come home. I was like, it looks like everything is aligned. The global geopolitical situation has changed. China is competing hard in Africa. And now, actually, we advocating for the United States to see that it has a competitive advantage in Africa compared to China, because China doesn't have a heritage connection to Africa. Here we are, more than 50 million people of African descent, a heritage connection to Africa, right? So if we are asleep and we're waking up, what will be the critical foundation for this renaissance? Education. I was like, okay, Nkrumah had seen it. They were working on connecting HBCUs and various stakeholders. We need to continue the work. So hence an HBCU Africa Homecoming initiative to establish a one-stop place for opportunity, economic and educational opportunity exchange between Africa and its diaspora. I am a beneficiary of the work that the ancestors, those enslaved Africans who come, I am a beneficiary of their hard work. They fought for these HBCUs. And I have stood on their shoulders. I've had access to one of the finest work experiences in the US. And it's all because of those people. So we stand here today to introduce this one-stop shop that we pushing for this opportunity exchange. At this point, I'm going to ask my brother Fede back there to roll the tape. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen up here, we may need to shift a little bit so that people will clearly. So two here, this way, that way, so that we can see clearly what the initiative about. We have prepared a short video presentation which gives an overview of the initiative. So in August, we're meeting in Ghana from August 1st through the 10th to launch the HBCU. Here we go. So that defines the framework for our path forward, starting with this launch today and the first HBCU Africa Homecoming in Ghana, August 1st through the 10th. And at that event, we're going to lay out the groundwork. We also have the endorsement of the Director of Diaspora Relations at the Office of the Ghanaian President. We're looking at an HBCU marching band participating in the 6th March Independence Parade in Ghana in 2020. So the question is, which one will it be? Anyone here want to vouch for one? All right, so we're going to provide a platform so that we collaboratively come up with that decision. How about that for democracy?
That's right.
So without much ado, I would want to invite you all, particularly this group I call the Pioneering Group, to Ghana from August 1st to 10th, where we join hands with other HBCU alums in Africa. Ghana, Nigeria, Tanzania. We're going to meet and together envision what we want the next 400 years to look like. So the time is short. We would like to see boards of trustees. We would like to see presidents. We would like to see alumni association presidents, various stakeholders joining us, and we'll be sending more information on that. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wow, I'm sitting there looking at all the great work that has gone into that. That is the power of vision. And we're all seated here today, and I heard one key word, collaboration. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. If a structure is in place, let's align with how can we be part of this. So thank you so very much for how far you have gone, and I'm sure each and every one of us know ways that we can make this really make a difference. It's a win-win for all. Our Africa is up to us to make it the best that the world is yet to see. There's so many distinguished people here this afternoon, but there's someone very special that I would like to recognize very briefly. That is the founder and the CEO and chairman of the Minor Football League, Mr. Richard Miles Sr., who is also cooking up some things for the Minor Football League in Africa. So Mr. Miles, rise up so you can be recognized. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right. So the next on my agenda here is to bring up to the podium Miss Leslie Baskerville, the NAFIO President and CEO. Let's give her a round of applause as we bring her up to the stage.
Thank you so very much, sister. Thank you so very much. Her Excellency, my brothers and sisters all, I'm privileged and humbled to be here on behalf of the National Association for Equal Opportunity in Higher Education, which is America's only membership and advocacy association of all whole of the richly diverse, historically black colleges and universities, 106 of them, and 50 predominantly black institutions. I'm here to say unequivocally and humbly to Brother Kwabena that we excitedly and wholeheartedly look forward to joining the HBCU the HBCU Homecoming movement. So thank you so very much. I greet you in the spirit of Ubuntu, my brothers and sisters. Ubuntu, which means roughly that I am because you are, that we are inextricably interconnected and interdependent. It goes back to what Her Excellency was talking about: one voice, one continent, one people. It talks about humanity and the spirit of coming together to have our collective voices heard with respect and love. We come in the spirit of Ubuntu, and we excitedly come to join in this effort. We come out of the same history as our brothers and sisters on the continent of people trying to repress and keep us down, and for many years success. But we come having been given the opening of creating an education, what became an education system in America that has yielded African Americans that are today That's better? I'm sorry. This what became an education system of richly diverse, historically black colleges and universities that have yielded African ancestors, brothers and sisters here in America that have skills and sensitivities and sensibilities, energies and passions, and never divorced ourselves from brothers and sisters on the continent. And for years, as Brother Kwabena pointed out, he talked about the number of African leaders that were educated in historically black colleges and universities. But that continues today with virtually every HBCU having richly diverse students, not only African ancestored persons from America, but Africans from the continent and the Americas. And so I'd like to talk just briefly about some of what HBCUs have that have well positioned us here in America, but will well position us to lead in partnership with the African Union and with everyone who is committed to bringing together our collective resources so that we can increase our education, increase wealth, increase liberation and justice that will move African ancestored people together as one. So HBCU of American colleges and universities. But today, these universities that you hear about, and you mostly hear about them as being poor, struggling, and in tremendous need, and many of the institutions, because of the history of exclusion and degradation and segregation and discrimination, are certainly not receiving dollars that are consistent with their output. But this 4% of colleges and universities in America that have 1/8 the size of the endowments of the majority endowments in America are yielding tremendous results. 42% of African American and African ancestred engineers in America are trained in HBCUs. 60% of African ancestred health professionals in America are trained in HBCUs. 60% of African ancestred public school teaching professionals in America trained in HBCUs. Increasing numbers of entrepreneurs trained in HBCUs, and HBCUs on average or collectively yield about $15 billion in short-term income, $15 billion HBCU income. And so what that means roughly, and they employ 177,000 full-time faculty. If you look at the Bank of America, that was the 23rd largest corporation in America, they had 188,000 full-time employees. And so we have a base in the community. Beyond that, I'm sorry, my time is up, but let me just say this. So the data are compelling. We come with rich resources that we will bring to the table, and we're interested in being a full partner in any way that we can serve. But we do want to focus specifically on 5 areas where we think that there's commonality. And I have to say this, so don't count this against me, because this goes to Her Excellency. When you talk about, and when we hear you, we all stand a little taller. We are inspired and prouder as African ancestry people, but as women. And so what Brother Boateng didn't tell you, that 400 years ago when Africans arrived on the shores of America at Jamestown, it was a sister named Angela, who was the first person to put her foot on American soil. And so when Sister, Her Excellency Arikana, stands and speaks for African people worldwide, and Sister Angela was the first person here, we know that women will play a special role in whatever effort that we have. So there are 5 areas that we're particularly interested in, and I just want to talk about them. We're hoping that from our colleges and universities we'll have researchers and a range of other people that'll work on, number 1, education and training. We think that's vitally important, areas where we can work together and grow together. Employment, entrepreneurship, economic stimulation, both rural and urban, wealth creation. 3, health, infrastructure, and environment. 4, STEM, science, technology, engineering, the arts or agriculture, and math. And 5, peace and justice. These are areas where we have strong footage, and with our brothers and sisters and our natural resources on the continent driven by technology, I know that at the end of the convenings, we will have a blueprint that will enable us to go back to our respective areas, but remain connected and move Africans worldwide to becoming one people, one voice, one nation, indivisible. Ubuntu, my brothers and sisters.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Baskerville, for that great presentation. We're happy that you are all behind this great initiative. 2012, May, I was privileged as a mother of an HBCU grad to listen to this man speak at the commencement of the Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. And like Her Excellency said, that was my first time of literally seeing him face to face, not just on TV. I was so fascinated listening to him. Today was my second time of setting my eyes on him again. And that great him is Mr. Roland Martin, a great leader who is so passionate about education, an extremely sought after person in the area of journalism, and someone who has stood firm for what it means to be black and proud, speaking truth to power. Without further ado, Mr. Roland Martin, good to see you again. God bless you. Take this.
Glad to see everyone here. I'm not going to be long. I appreciate the opportunity just to address you. I got to head back to do my show, Roland Martin Unfiltered, and so we're working on that. And one of the things that we created when I was at TV One, created HBCU Giving Day, because I had all these universities who were on, and we were talking about giving back, and the average alumni giving was around 5%. And so we started picking one each particular day. And in the addition to that, oftentimes when I travel around the country doing my show, I would actually do it from an HBCU campus. And so it probably has been at least 12 or 15. And I say that because I think part of the issue that we're dealing with when we talk about what is happening right now, it's news and information. And I think that when you look at what is actually happening on HBCU campuses, I can draw a parallel to what's happening on the continent, because the reality is somebody else is actually telling the story. You look at the first black newspaper, Freedom's Journal, 1827, in the lead editorial they wrote, "We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us." And I think that's also part of this problem. And so when you look at mainstream media today, when you look at the folks who are commenting on what's happening in this country, you aren't seeing individuals who actually work at HBCUs talking about politics. When I was in, and when of course for the longest, Dr. Ron Walters was the preeminent political scientist in the country, and I've made the point to many HBCUs, who will be the individuals who replace him, and I dare say no one has actually stepped up on the national level in terms of that particular space. And I always use the platforms, whether it's Tom Joyner Morning Show, whether it is all of my shows, to do that. And so I think as a part of this, the most, and I would dare say the second most important thing behind the link to the various HBCUs, it has to be a strong media component. Yes. Because otherwise, how will folks know? And I think, and because of technology, you're live streaming this event, we're shooting it, we'll stream it later as well. We have to use technology to do so. When I was in Ghana in 2008, I had a radio show on WVON in Chicago, and I actually broadcast my show from there. Here we are now 11 years later, technology has totally changed, and so the communication piece has to be a critically important part, because otherwise there's no way for folks not only across the country but across the world to be able to hear. Now that we launched my digital platform 9 months ago, my fan base in Canada, in the UK, in the West Indies, and in Africa, folks can actually now see. They couldn't actually see the show before. And so I would really encourage everybody to really hone in on how do you not only connect the HBCUs with African countries, but also those HBCUs with strong communication programs. Morgan State is one, Clark Atlanta is another. You also talk about Florida A&M, Howard University. I did my show for Norfolk State. They do some great things down at University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff. But that is really, really, really important, because you have to be able to control the narrative. You have to be able to tell the story. And I think that has been one of the biggest problems, I think, with HBCUs today, is who is telling the story and driving that narrative. And then also, I think when you talk about what is happening on the continent, who's also telling that story and being able to have access and for folks to actually hear. When we show it tonight, I can guarantee you, I would dare say, if I put a number on it, I would dare say 98% of black folks have never heard about the Berlin Conference in 1884. And so when you talk about what is happening today, if you don't have that understanding, and that's also why when you see those folks who are on cable news talking about these various issues, if they also don't have a historical reference to operate from, they're simply operating based upon what somebody else told them, as opposed to having that. And so I would really encourage that. Whatever we can do to assist, we're certainly there to do so. I hate the date August 1 through 10th, because that's the same time as our National Association of Black Journalists Convention. I'm on the board of directors as VP Digital, so I kind of got to be there. But whatever assistance we can make, but that won't be the only time. We certainly can do some things. And so I really, really, really want us to talk about that. And whatever I can do to help, I would be glad to meet with folks for us to really have a really targeted discussion about how do we use media, digital media, to be able to drive this. I put together, I've got about 2.3 million social media followers. There are other African Americans, and I'm telling you right now, if you actually combine the social media footprint of your HBCUs, it's major. And I'll give you this last point just so you can understand that information. I did an interview with Dr. Hadai Green, a brilliant sociologist sister who's at Morehouse School of Medicine, graduate of Tuskegee Institute. And if you think about all of the interviews, all of the commentaries that I've dropped, whether it was my comments about Wendy Williams, her comments about HBCUs, that generated about 8 million views on Facebook. My Bill O'Reilly commentary generated about 7 million. But the interview that I did with Dr. Green, a HBCU graduate, talking about her research to end cancer, that interview by itself has been seen has had more than 14 million views on Facebook. 14 million. So the platforms are there. The question is, how do we use them to drive our story? And so I certainly look forward to that. So thanks a bunch, folks, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Mr. Martin, for that show of support, an extension of how we can make media work better to tell the story from our own version. Thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause. Moving right along. The next person that we would have the honorable pleasure of bringing up to the podium is none other than Dr. David Wilson. My bad. Dr. Ronald Johnson, member of the U.S. President's Advisory on HBCU, chair of Consumer Advisory Board of the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, immediate past president of Clark Atlanta University. Without further ado, I would like to my tongue is twisted. I would like to call Dr. Roland Johnson to please come up to the podium. And in the interim, recognizing his better half, Mrs. Johnson is also in the house. You're welcome.
Good afternoon, and welcome to today's important proceedings. I am currently on the White House, on the President's Board of Advisors for the White House Initiative, but today's discussion will be based on my own experience. I'll share that with you in a moment. I want to thank Her Excellency. This is really fabulous, really fabulous. And Kwame Boateng for really conceptualizing something that I could only imagine back in 1973 when I was here in D.C. As part of the Pan-African movement marches. And I would like to just begin with just a brief framing. And I know I will not be long, but a brief framing. In 1982, I was a part of a mission team from the International Monetary Fund. And the head of the mission was Omotunde Johnson. A little bit more about Omotunde in a minute. We landed in Johannesburg. Omotunde walked in front of me. And as we got off the plane, 2 South African Boer guards with machine guns grabbed Omotunde, threw him up against the wall with their machine guns. They looked at me, and I just walked by. And of course, Omotunde reached into his pocket and said, laissez-passer, laissez-passer, and he pulled out his UN passport, of which, of course, I had one. Interestingly, they did not stop me, but they stopped Omotunde. Interesting about Omotunde is that Omotunde was from Sierra Leone. And he's a Johnson from Sierra Leone. His people were actually people who fought with the British in the U.S. against the colonists. And at the end of the Revolutionary War, the British transported those folks up to Canada, and then they transported them to Sierra Leone. The separations. And meanwhile, the two of us are in South Africa, and we're both honorary whites. The separations, can you imagine the separations? Prior to that, I think about this in the context of a trip I took when I was a graduate student at Stanford, and I took a friend of mine, Jima, from Ghana. He wanted to go to Disneyland, and I was going to be in LA, so I told him, come on down, and I'll take you to Disneyland. And the first ride we got on, that doesn't exist anymore, was Captain Nemo's submarine. And so we got on the submarine, and when we got off, Jima turned to me and he said, "Thank you, Ron." And I said, "For what?" He said, "I've never been on a boat." I said, "That's why you're Ghanaian." Okay. And so this is really important, because what we're talking about now is what we marched in 73, what was talked about in 63, is to finally pull together, and not only culturally, but from an economic perspective. This is very, very powerful. And I just want to say just a few notes about what has been discussed, and certainly that the image that was presented earlier really captures a lot of what I want to say. But I want to point out that the HBCUs are part of a supply chain that connects future talent with the consumers of market-ready talent. Yeah. And in that supply chain, there has to be efficiencies, and that's one of the things that I really appreciate. Of course, an engineer, I was initially trained in electrical engineering before going into economics, which is nothing more than engineering, but with people. The whole idea is that the supply chain, though, has got to become efficient. It's not sufficient for us to just do what was done in the past. It's important for us to now look for ways in which we unbundle those services and provide specific services that each institution has expertise in. Dr. Wilson's school has expertise in many areas, especially in engineering. And so if the arrangements are made so that people actually go to the places where they have their competitive advantage, then you actually create something that is tremendous, that will actually have legs and actually will be leveraged in terms of performance. The last point I want to make, because I know that we've been here for a bit of time, and I know there are others that will be speaking, the idea of the Union of African Nations, and then connecting to all of those who were on boats, is really important, because the way that wealth is created is that you have a multiplier effect of the currency in the society. It goes around more than one time. Currently, for many African countries, and certainly for African Americans, currency comes into your community and goes right back out. So there's no residual. It's sort of like turning on the faucet, but the hole in the bottom of the sink is so wide that when you turn it off, there's nothing at the bottom. And so what this involves is to put a stopper in there so that the water can accumulate, and we can actually deal with the disparities because you have the resources to do so. So I say to you that this is a tremendous event, and it has legs. It's time that it's happened. It's a dream come true, and I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson, Dr. Johnson, for your brief presentation. Next on the agenda is Mr. Kojo Yanka. Mr. Kojo Yanka is the African Opportunities, is the Chancellor, African University College of Communications representative. Without further ado, we'd like to call up Mr. Kojo Yanka, who is also very well connected with the Ministry of Education in Ghana. Welcome, sir.
Well, I'll take only 3 minutes out of my 15 minutes so that the others can fill in the vacuum. Now, slight correction. My brother is a Minister of State for Education in Ghana. Correct. I used to be a Minister for Information and Communication, so I know a lot of people mix us up in introductions, but I'm glad to be here. At the beginning, I thought I was in a lecture room, when the ambassador was speaking at the same time. It was also like being in a program where you're raising awareness for people to go out to the world and work. It was a wake-up call. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Kwame's initiative is commendable, and I support it. I have told him a couple of times. We met last year, and this year, my university, is open up to him for any forum or any discussions that he wants to hold with any other universities in Ghana. I must say that we have an association of African universities on the continent, and some of the universities are related or have some relationship with HBCUs in terms of exchange program. Not too many, but I think there's an opportunity to extend the invitation to a lot more of them to be part of it. People are pursuing so many other programs in science, technology, in mathematics, and communication. My university is mainly in communication and business, and I'm happy to hear from Roland. The point that is missing in this whole African Union thing is communication and information, and I think a bigger part of the responsibility lies on the universities. Most of the universities are still teaching subjects that don't relate to the subject matter at the moment. And so we have history classes that are not teaching the history of our own people. I belong to the school where we were taught that Africans did not have a history, and but with time, we know we have a rich history. And so we've taken the trouble to start from the ancient civilization to say that we had a civilization, we had empires, we had kingdoms before the invasions and the explorations and invasions and exploitations came through colonialism up till today. Now, what I think this initiative can do is to look at what are the materials, what are the tools for connecting. Yes, we can visit, we can relate to the universities, but we should have common programs. We should have common books, magazines, materials, radio programs like Roland is talking about. What can unite the two sides? It's not just here that people do not know about 1844, but also even on the continent of Africa. So while our brothers and sisters on this side did not know what happened even before the so-called captives were brought over, those on the other side do not also know what happened when they left the castles and forts in Africa. So this is the kind of history we should bring together. That incidentally is also the subject of the book that I'm doing, which is will be launched by Her Excellency, who is in the foreword, and we launched it early July this year. But the important thing is that we need to educate ourselves. If the incoming homecoming initiative is to bring the two sides together, then there should be a lot of opportunities and tools for communicating with each other. We need to listen to each other. Programs like Roland is talking about can go into other universities. Apart from, I watch him on Facebook, but yeah, but it can be directed to some universities that accepts and will take the time that he's opening up to listen. Ambassador Chihombori Quao is known in Ghana for the YouTube presentations that go around all over the continent. So we should use the tools that are available to expand the communication space. And that, for me, will be an area I'll be very interested in to support so that we bring our people together through communication, education, and information. I thank you.
Thank you so very much. I was waiting for the space to be available. We now have to bring up to the podium the president of Morgan State University in Baltimore, an HBCU where I have several of my nieces and nephews who are there. So I'm excited to meet you in person so I can tell them I saw their president. So without further ado, sir, we'd like to bring you up and hear some remarks from you. Good to meet you, sir.
And please send many more of those nieces and nephews to Morgan. I'm really going to be extremely brief and bring my remarks in within 5 minutes. But first of all, I do want to say to Madam Ambassador, thank you. Thank you for giving what I consider to be the most succinct yet comprehensive history of Africa that I have heard. And so, I did write on my notepad here, invite the ambassador to speak at Morgan. My students need to hear you, and I hope that you will honor us with your presence on our campus. I really want to also thank the other organizers, Kabina, for putting on this HBCU Africa Homecoming. I think it is a very innovative concept, and we at Morgan are looking forward, to understanding it more and seeing ways in which we can participate. I want to make 4 major points with my brief remarks. The first is that in 1987, as I walked across the stage at Harvard and received my 4th college degree, 2 of them from that institution, I realized that I was the most uneducated and undereducated person in the United States. Because even though I had 4 college degrees, I had never set foot outside of the United States. And so I realized that I needed to do something about that. I applied for an international leadership development program at the time that was operated by the Kellogg Foundation. And the Kellogg Foundation selected about 35 up-and-coming leaders between the ages of 25 and 40, and for a 3-year period enabled us to go all over the world to study leadership and history. I was selected for some reason, and I started my trek. And my first major trip was to Africa, and I spent about 2 months there initially. And I was quite bold with 2 or 3 other people in the class. We wrote ahead of time and asked for an audience with Mr. Julius Nyerere, Mr. Nelson Mandela, Mr. Oliver Tambo, Mr. Walter Sisulu, actually with Mr. Moi from Kenya, with Mr. Nyoma from Namibia, with Robert Mugabe, and with Mr. Moi from Kenya. And all of them gave us an audience. And it was the most amazing transformational experiences. And what I realized, particularly in my initial conversation with Mr. Julius Nyeri, he invited us to his lake home there on Lake Tanganyika in Arusha. And we were there for about 3 hours, literally at his feet. He was in a rocking chair, and we sat on the porch at his feet, and I pulled out my legal pad, and I took all these notes. I was just so unbelievably moved and impressed by the perspective that he imbued in me. To make a long story short, I had always said that if I had a son, that I wanted him to have the characteristics of my father, but I did not want him to carry my father's name. And I saw in Mr. Nyeri all of those characteristics, and I asked him if I could name my son after him, and he graciously agreed, and so my son's name is Nyeri. And that began to establish for me a foundation that was void in my educational preparation. And so from that point, I went all over Africa. I spent some incredible time from the northern part, Egypt, and all the countries there, all the way to South Africa. Indeed, I've been in South Africa about 15 times. That's the first piece, is that I have really sought to educate myself. So, Madam Ambassador, that as a leader, as I was coming up and occupying these spaces, I would never, ever, ever be hoodwinked. I would have the context now to make decisions and to, if you will, dismiss someone else's biases and predilections. Second, we at Morgan have been paying a lot of attention to how we engage Africa now in a very substantive way. And let me just share with you some of the things that we have done and just a couple of things that we are doing. First of all, yes, we are one of the leaders in the United States in the production of African-American engineers. We're number 5 in the United States in the production of African-American engineers in all fields. We're number 1 in electrical, number 1 in civil, and number 1 in industrial. But what we realized was that there was an opportunity to work with the deans of engineering schools throughout the African continent and to bring them together in a collective. And so my Associate Dean of the College of Engineering in Morgan has been working now to officially organize the Organization of Engineering Deans in Africa. So we can basically work with those universities to ensure that the kind of production that we are seeing here in the United States coming out of HBCUs can also come out of the African universities as well. Second, we are exploring, and let me underscore exploring, whether there are opportunities for Morgan to collaborate in a meaningful way, including the possibility of having a campus in Africa. And we were invited by the president of Nigeria to come and take a look at 3 possible sites there. I sent a team of emissaries from Morgan to take a look at a possible site in Abuja, as well as 2 other places in Nigeria, and we are still in the process of looking at that, if you will, because there's a lot involved, but we have made the first step. We've taken them up on the invitation, and we have started to do the research in terms of whether that is a possibility. And then we also taking advantage of opportunities to go and to speak at institutions all over the country. And so I've been invited in August to be the keynote speaker at the Open University of Nigeria. for their annual piece there, and we are taking advantage of those opportunities as well. And last, as I looked at what could be some additional emerging opportunities for the HBCU Africa Homecoming Initiative and Morgan, I saw several, but one is in blockchain, cryptocurrency, and fintech. We just received a $2 million grant, became the only HBCU in which actually it's being funded in this space to build at Morgan a center in fintech. We just opened it, and the purpose of that is to make sure that any HBCU in the country that wanted to develop curricular expertise around that could actually work with Morgan to enable that to happen. And so I see no reason why we could not extend that, if you will, to the continent as well. And so we look forward to that. And then last, we actually unveiled an initiative at Morgan last year where every single student going forward, before he or she will graduate from the institution, will have to have had an experience in one of 4 areas. One, they must have had either a study abroad experience, an internship experience, an experience working with a faculty member in a research setting, or an experiential learning experience. And so with that in mind, we see opportunities for study abroad because we have partnered, I should say, with the Department of State. We bring to our campus every year passport machines, and students actually can get their passports in a matter of 2 hours, and I provide the support for them to do that because many of them don't have the money. But we are promoting in a very rigorous way and vigorous way the study abroad experiences. So a platform like this, because we have to go through all kinds of organizations in order to arrange that with the right universities, how do we do the tuition exchange piece? And so there is a common platform that we can use in order to get more of our students from HBCUs studying in Africa. That would be nirvana. So once again, congratulations to all of you, and we look forward to participating.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson, for all those great news. And I'm sure a lot of follow-ups would happen after today. We would like to bring up HU, Howard University International Experience Conductor, Ms. Tonya Navas, Director of International Program.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tonya Hope Navas, and it is a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you to Her Excellency Ambassador Chihombori Quao for hosting us today and for your support of this initiative. Thank you to Kwame for extending an invitation to Howard University to participate in this important event. I bring greetings from our president, Dr. Wayne Frederick, and the Howard University family, many of whom are here with me today. So, okay, yes. I knew it was coming. As the daughter of a Liberian mother and the great-granddaughter of John Hope, the first black president of Morehouse College and Atlanta University, I am particularly excited about this HBCU Africa Homecoming Initiative, as it highlights 2 things that I am both personally and professionally interested and committed to: Africa and HBCUs. Unfortunately, according to the Institute for International Education, only 6.1% of students studying abroad identify as Black or African American, a number that is entirely too low given the proven benefits of the study abroad experience. At Howard, we are deeply committed to promoting and facilitating impactful interactions between and among people globally. But our connection and rich history with the continent is one that we are proud of, that endures, and that will continue to blossom as new opportunities are born. Through the Ralph J. Bunche International Affairs Center, of which I have the honor of serving as director, we support mid to long-term study abroad for our undergraduate students through programs with our study abroad partners. This last academic year, 9 Howard University students studied on the continent for a semester through our center, and this fall, another 15 are planning on studying in Ghana, South Africa, Tanzania, Morocco, and Senegal. University-wide, however, there is a lot of activity and connection with Africa. There are currently 9 students studying Swahili in Tanzania with our Swahili professor. Another group of approximately 30 students is in Ghana. 15 Howard University students won all of the spots for the Fulbright Hayes program to study Zulu in South Africa and will leave soon. Another group will head to University of Ibadan to study Yoruba in the next couple of weeks, and another 30 will head to Egypt with Drs. Gregory Carr and Mario Beatty to decipher hieroglyphics later this summer. Approximately 25 of our law students head to Cape Town every summer and take classes at the University of Western Cape, and have been doing so for at least the last 20 years, while our social work students head there every spring break for a service learning project led by our Assistant Provost for International Programs, Dr. Kudor Snell, who is originally from Cape Town. Our women's volleyball team spent 2 weeks last summer in Botswana and Zimbabwe, the first HBCU women's team to take such a world tour. Howard is also involved in a number of health-related grant-funded projects in Nigeria, South Africa, Mozambique, and Zambia. There is no denying that our entire institution is in one way or another connected to the continent and committed to collaboration and exchange. The Ralph Bunche Center recently, as in 2 weeks ago, during the NAFSA International Education Conference that was held here at the Convention Center, won an award for our #StudyAbroadSoBlack movement, which is a movement that we created to allow our students to see themselves out in the world. So if you see on our Twitter or Instagram platforms and you go to #StudyAbroadSoBlack, you can see images from our students, but also students from any school who decide they want to contribute to that #StudyAbroadSoBlack movement, so that our students can see themselves out in the world and know that that is a place for them as well. We have to do a better job at supporting our students' interests in studying abroad on the continent so that relationships and bonds can be established that will facilitate more opportunities for business, research, collaboration, and advancement for all of us, both on the continent and in the diaspora. So I applaud this effort and look forward to doing our part to help those relationships grow. This fall, in November, we will be hosting our second HBCU Symposium on Study Abroad, Prioritize and Lead. We hosted that 2 years ago and had a participation from about 30 HBCUs, and we will be extending the invitation to all HBCUs to participate again, send representatives so that we can all continue to help facilitate this type of exchange and opportunity for our students. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Navas, for the great work that Howard University is doing in country and on the continent. Thank you. Dr. Joan Roll Mega is also going to be coming up, an HBCU Dean of Business and AFCTA. Dr. Joan Roll Mega Evers.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna put myself on a timer because academicians typically go overtime, so I kept trying to find it. I am indeed honored and privileged to be with you here. I give greetings from my president, Rudy Crew, and our provost, Augustine Okoriki, who is from Nigeria. I'd like to just tell you a little bit about what I'm going to tell you about, and then tell you, and then I'm going to leave. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the HBCU business deans, the work that is already going on between HBCU business deans. I also want to acknowledge one of my colleagues and friends who's here from another HBCU collaboration. That's the HBCU Human Rights Group, and he's here from Morgan State. Would you please stand, Dr. Terry? Yes. So my point here is that we are already collaborating, we're already working together, and so if we can leverage some of the work that we are already doing, it is good. The second piece, I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the work that Medgar Evers College is doing and what it has been doing in the way of international collaborations with the scholars, with the students, and with the administrators. And then finally, I want to bring the story home on an individual case where we took a student abroad and how that student personally developed his own business in another country, and that work came out of the work that we did when we first took them. The message is the students have to be exposed. The students have to be exposed. They can't know what they don't know. And so in my own personal life, and this is why I'm so wedded to this, at the age of 20-something, I went to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. I was there when Julius Nyerere was there. I worked as an economist. I was one of the first female students who was in the PhD program in economics at Howard University. Howard University is the first HBCU to have a PhD program in economics. And when I was there, I saw the need. I also had my only daughter, my only child. And so the issue is not just what you do professionally, but what you do personally. My daughter has gone back and forth to Dar es Salaam. I have been back and forth all over the continent. But my granddaughter, who is 6 years old, has not been to the continent yet. And on July 14th, she will make her maiden voyage so that no one has to tell her what Africa is. She will see for herself what Africa is. And so let me just tell you about let me watch my time. So let me just tell you a little bit about the HBCU business deans. They have been around for the last 2 decades. They work together with each other to collaborate and to leverage the resources. You know, there are many, many colleges throughout the U.S., but the way we find power is in uniting together, collaborating together, coordinating. What does the business need? How can we leverage entrepreneurship among our students? How can we leverage the needs and desires of the industry so that our students will meet it and be competitive? So we already are doing that work, and I want to extend an arm. There's a board of directors of the HBCU business deans, and that board can help get the message that we need to work more and more collaboratively on the continent. And so in terms of some of the things we already do the study abroad, we do experiential learning, and we are developing the talent pipeline. Okay, so in terms of broad-based experience at Medgar Evers College, I'd say I've been there 5 years, and in the last 3 years, in 18 months, we took students, a group of students, to about 10 to 15 countries. First, we raised the money, and we raised the money in tech and entrepreneurship. Tech, and I'm very pleased to hear of the work in terms of fintech. And one of the countries that we went to was Kenya, and in Nairobi, Kenya, we went there 3 times. Now, let me tell you why we have to go often. The first time the students was just awed, and they said, "Oh, Dean, we got to up our game. The Kenyans are really doing stuff." Because what have they been told? They haven't been told about a lot of the technology and a lot of the proficiency in Africa. So when they see it for themselves, that was on the on the first trip. By the second trip, they were saying, "Well, how can we do business?" I didn't have to tell them what business is to do. They were making their own networks. They were developing their own contacts. So my message is, it takes more than one time. You got to go and go and go. Because, you see, I'm already out of time. I told you it would happen. All right, I'm gonna end by saying I like to story tell about my students because that is the reason for us being. And so one of the students who had on his second try, he had developed context to build his website in Nairobi. He had developed context to source his supplies in Nairobi. He is an accounting major from a little small island called St. Lucia. Most of our students are immigrants from either the Caribbean or Africa. That's the story of Medgar Evers. And so he graduated last week. 2 weeks from now, he will be back in Nairobi on dime, developing his business, and he plans to launch end of July, and all of the goods and services are coming out of Nairobi. That's the power of an education.
Wow, I know you can feel the passion right there. Passion of action. Thank you so very much. We have several HBCU representatives in the house, which is a very good validation of the work that has gone in this program. The next person that we would want to come up is Delaware State representation of Ezra Arahone.
Good afternoon. All protocols observed, all respect also given. Thank you for inviting me, Brother Kwabena. This was unexpected to give a brief presentation, but I'm happy to be here on behalf of Delaware State. I see my big brother here, Kojo Yenka. Great to see you. At Delaware State, we've launched what is known as the Center for Global Africa, which is an operational think tank and a means by which academically we are looking at how we can translate what happens intellectually into the economies of Africa as an agency to make the sixth region function more relevantly and also expand the role and relevance of HBCUs. And this is not without precedent. And I want to say that our institution is the twin brother of what Brother Kwabena is doing. You know, and one name that I want to cite to give some context to this is the great Martin Delany, who many people don't know and they oftentimes overlook. But Martin Delany actually in the 1850s went to Africa to establish treaties with then in the area of Nigeria for Africans in America to return. And Delany, in his great ways, did not view what he was doing in Africa as a competing ideal with what others wanted to do inside of America. He looked at it as an extension of the experience. And so oftentimes, when we talk about doing things in Africa, there's this tendency like it's a competing idea, or you hate white people, or what axe do you have to grind? But Delany personified this concept as what I call both and, that he was both African and he was American in the context that he understood why it was important to expand the experience. And so our Center for Global Africa reflects just that, the expansion of the experience. And it also reflects this idea that we have that, you know, one of the greatest differences, as I would argue as a professor, between Europeans and Africans filters into the way in which the end use of our intellect is applied. You know, who benefits more from your end use? You know, you or someone else. And if we don't begin to benefit from the end use of what we know just as much or more than others, then it's a question mark about the degree to which we can honestly say we are free. And so it's great that HBCUs now are looking to Africa and Africa looking to HBCUs in this integrated way. And one of the things that we've done at Del State with the Center for Global Africa is established a partnership with an African Union agency called the African Peer Review Mechanism. An African peer review mechanism is an agency of the African Union that evaluates the proficiency of governance and socio-economic performance of African nations with the view to make recommendations and to have these various governments implement those recommendations. So of the 55 African nations that are members of the AU, 39 of them are members of APRM. And so it is through the leverage of those 39 nations that we work with APRM in this vast and necessary means by which we want to connect the intellect of what happens at HBCUs with the economies of Africa. And so we look forward to working hand in hand with the HBCU Africa Homecoming, and more so as well with our great Ambassador Quao, who we had the pleasure of having her at our conference in April this year. And we are excited about this whole opportunity, and we'll see you in, August? Yes. We'll see everyone in August. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Ms. Kimberly Harrington from Livingstone College. Welcome. All right, let's keep clapping.
We drove 7 hours to be here. That is
wow. Wow. Good to meet you. All right.
I don't agree, said W.E.B. If I should have to drive to seek knowledge of chemistry or Greek, I'll do it. Charles and Miss can look another place for hand or cook. Some men rejoice in skills of hand, and some in cultivating land, but there are others who maintain the right to cultivate the brain. Good afternoon. I'm Kimberly Harrington, Director of Public Relations at Livingstone College. And to Your Excellency, I'd like to thank you for your passionate remarks that moved me, inspired me, and educated me. I have a personal and professional interest in the motherland. I had the chance to visit Liberia in April, and while there I visited an orphanage, and I'm in the process of adopting a child from there. So thank you. And thank you, Mr. Boateng, for inviting Livingstone College to be a part of this historic occasion. As you all may know, North Carolina has more HBCUs than any other state in the country, and we are the lone ones here today from North Carolina, and I'm grateful for that. We get to stand out a little bit. But I bring you greetings along with my colleague, Keith Anderson, on behalf of Livingstone College and the 12th president, Dr. Jimmy R. Jenkins, Sr. The college, referred to by Du Bois as the Harvard of the South. The college that cultivated James Agri of Ghana from student to teacher to preacher. And the college that was founded by the Freedom Church, African Methodist Episcopal Zion. President Jenkins has a popular saying on campus, love is an action word. I stand before you today to announce that Livingstone College supports this HBCU Africa Homecoming initiative, and that this affirmation is not without action, as our past behavior will serve as an indicator of our future intentions. How do we love thee? Let us count the ways. Just last month, Livingstone College met with representatives from the Liberian Ministry of Education to discuss partnership initiatives. We have since followed up with an invitation inviting Liberia's president to visit our campus for further deliberations. And as I mentioned in April, I personally visited AME Zion University in Liberia and met with its president and its interim management committee. And I had a chance to tour its Po River campus, where a 24 classroom building construction is underway. I saw the challenges firsthand, their need for new textbooks, transportation to and from its campuses, the financial constraints, and yet there is an imperishable zeal to learn and educate themselves. As a result of that visit, Livingstone College has agreed to pursue student and teacher exchanges with Zion University and to donate textbooks. Thank you. Currently, Currently, Livingstone hosts 2 full-time students every year through an agreement with the Liberian Organization of the Piedmont, which is based in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And finally, Livingstone College also has collaborations with the country of Uganda. The HBCU Africa Homecoming Initiative is providing a portal to partner with other African countries so that we can expand our Pan-Africanism efforts that are already underway. There has been a national debate or discussion lately about the relevancy of HBCUs. I say this initiative substantiates our historic purpose then, reinforces our relevancy today, and solidifies our hope for tomorrow. Thank you, African Diaspora Nation, for leading this charge and carrying the baton passed by Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, and James Aggrey. A charge that is creating a paradigm shift in securing the future of HBCUs and strengthening our global connections through the African diaspora. This effort gives new meaning to the last words of the Negro National Anthem that we sang earlier. May we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your passion, Ms. Harrington, and for that great presentation and the long drive. We wish you safe travels back home. We have some people who could not be here due to previous commitment. So I would like to call up Mr. Kwame Boateng to facilitate the virtual people who are waiting to contribute and to share with us that they are in support of what we are launching today. So without further ado, we bring the visionary here, Mr. Boateng.
Thank you again, Remy. We are of the attitude that a lot of resources are required to deliver the goals of this initiative. And we also have the attitude that we can create those resources. So we've sought out strategic partnerships. Dr. Wilson talked about fintech, blockchain. Those are innovative areas of technology which can unleash an economy which can sustain a paradigm where each HBCU student gets an Africa immersion experience. So I would like to bring on a strategic partnership we forged with Albany State's Department of Computer Science. So Dr. Robert Owo is representing, and he's going to be coming in remotely to underscore our full leverage of technology. So Fete, would you let Dr. Owo speak? We're talking about some blockchain and fintech partnerships which can really create a huge paradigm shift. All right, thank you.
Allowing me this great opportunity to speak to your distinguished guests.
Can you hold on a second, Dr. Owo, so that we can put you on the screen?
Okay.
All right, we're ready for you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Boateng, for allowing me this opportunity to address
accomplishments, we will go to Dr. Anthony Asai, the Diaspora Nation College in Ghana, and also the secretary to the Asante Paramount Chief. Yes, sir.
Hello. Mr. Boateng, could you mute, perhaps?
Okay. All right. Yeah, you can go on now. Can you come? Yes.
Okay, so I will continue. I thank Mr. Boateng very much for this opportunity. I would like to thank the ambassador for hosting this occasion where I think Africa has an opportunity to use its power, which is in the diaspora, to transform the continent. I have been engaged with technology for the last 34 years. I'm currently a professor of computer science and software engineering at Albany State University, which is an HBCU. In the year 2017, we were fortunate to be the first University of Georgia System University to begin blockchain, machine learning, and artificial intelligence courses. Since then, we have graduated several students. We have what is called a Nexus degree program, which I think can be very useful for the continent of Africa and for other universities in the USA, because you just simply add 18 hours to a 120-degree program, and you specialize in courses like blockchain, machine learning, artificial intelligence. We have trained several students and partnered with a number of big companies like IBM, and so we want to leverage this expertise and provide it for several educational agencies back in Africa as well. Atlanta is actually the fintech capital of the world, and there are so many fintech companies there who are looking for great opportunities. I'm excited that a brother institution, Morgan State University, is doing very well with blockchain. We've heard about the great work they're doing there, and we certainly want to collaborate with them as well. I believe that blockchain can transform the economy of Africa, because one of Africa's greatest weakness is a weak financial system, which the ambassador alluded to when she talked about the economic structure of Africa and how it makes us dependent. I think that blockchain technology can be leveraged to create a financial system which will help Africa to develop. I wouldn't want to talk too much about the kind of things we can do, but from housing to mining to real estate to transportation, blockchain systems can be developed to accomplish it. I look forward to working with several of you. I run several programs, both locally and internationally, in blockchain, in machine learning. We are working with NASA as well to apply blockchain in space missions. So we're doing quite a few things, and I would be very excited to partner with various African organizations to see that we bring this technology to the continent. This summer, I'm running a small boot camp for high school kids, and I'm teaching them robotics, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. And this is one way in which we are trying to raise a number of African American kids to become the great scientists tomorrow. And we want to do this for Africa as well. I know that we have a short time and I could talk for quite a while, but I'm very thankful to Mr. Boateng for this opportunity to address this august the community of Africans and African Americans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Now we'll go to Dr. Anthony Osei, Chancellor of Dominion University College in Ghana. Dr. Osei, you can unmute yourself now.
Thank you very much, Governor, for the opportunity. I never thought this was such a great gathering. I would want to congratulate you for bringing all these many people together for this match. On behalf of the President and Chairman of Council of Dominion University, would like to say that we are grateful for giving us this opportunity. Ours is a new university and we are looking for partners. And I dare say, I know a lawyer, Joyce Williams, is there with you, who introduced me to you. And the main idea was to partner you to see how best the two of us can, put our resources together and benefit each other. I know my senior colleague, so the whole former minister, Professor Kojo Yanka, who is also a leader in education in Ghana, and I'm so impressed with, the good things that he said so far. Dominion University College in Accra is proudly associated with this historic initiative, and it is positioned to make it a success in the forthcoming homecoming summit. I, as Chancellor, like you introduced you, also doubles as a key. And my interaction with you was to talk about exchange with students from outside and then from HBCU. And we are lucky to say that your people are interested in the African culture, the traditional settings that we have, and we want to introduce them to what Ashanti and Africa has. It is a great opportunity for me to be here with you, and I trust that over time we are going to benefit from the large resource that you have. Many universities that are offering something for Mother Africa. Mother Africa needs the United States. The United States has a lot of potential, and most of our brothers find themselves there. We are deprived, and I don't think at this stage there's much fight to see anything. We should organize ourselves to tap the resources in Africa. We have more resources than any continent, but it looks like leadership has been a problem for us. We are trusting that future generations that will come will leave the politics aside, concentrate on technology to help develop Africa. It is my hope that homecoming summit will be a success, and I wish you all the best. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Professor. So at this point, we're going to bring back Mel. Okay. So we're going to have Mel Foote, but I also want to acknowledge someone in the room today. We have the ambassador from the Year of Return Committee, Mr. Diallo Sumbri, who has been doing some amazing work with Bridging Africa and its Diaspora. Met him a year ago, and he's been able to marshal the presidency of Ghana and a number of stakeholders, bringing them to DC, doing the press release, launching the Year of Return, which is causing waves globally. Thank you very much, my brother, for your presence here, and want to just acknowledge you for that. I'll go back to Dr. Duriye, who will introduce Mel.
I get to introduce one of my favorite people. When you talk about pioneers to diaspora initiatives and movement, Mr. Mel Foot, CFA, clearly tops the chart of the talkers and the doers on the continent. We are privileged today to have him come and give some closing remarks. I know he's excited that action-oriented initiatives are finally happening on the continent. Without further ado, let's bring Mr. Melvin Foot from Constituency for Africa to the podium to give us some closing remarks.
How are you? How are you? Thank you very much. Good afternoon. First, let me say kudos to my ambassador, who's always doing a great job and really she's the hardest working person on Africa, period. And I'm a pretty hard working person myself. I get tired just looking at her sometimes. She moves so fast. So, and then she's really passionate about it. She's really committed to it and determined to make something happen. I support her in any way I can. Let me say, I'm always nervous to be in a room with all these PhDs. I mean, it just makes me nervous. Sometimes I'm wishing one of you would give me an honorary degree so I could feel that I want to put in a plug right now. But Constituency for Africa is 30 years old, and we work to build a base of support for Africa. We work to educate Americans about Africa, improve cooperation, coordination among these organizations, and we work to shape United States policy on Africa. We work to shape what they do in the White House and what they do in the Congress and what they do in the World Bank. We actually try to impact it by really getting diaspora engagement. And I've been at it my whole career, over 40 years. I've been working. I started out as a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer in Ethiopia, Eritrea during the revolution. And my daughter, in fact, is a Peace Corps volunteer now. She's in Benin as a volunteer. So I feel like the legacy is carrying on. But I've been involved on this for a long time. I've been seeing I work closely with Reverend Leon Sullivan in the Sullivan effort to African-American summits, and a lot of the HBCUs were involved. We lost one of our icons, Niyara Sudarkis, last week, and her son Michael was on my board. But I know she was heavily involved in trying to figure out how do you get these HBCUs to impact in Africa. And it's more than kente cloth. It's more than talk. It's more than rhetoric. We actually got to get some things done. There's a new book out, just came out last week, called African Americans in Africa. And the author is Dr. Namada Blyden, who's a professor here in Washington, at George Washington University, Sierra Leone. I strongly encourage all of you to get that book. I know you can get it on Amazon. You can also get it at Prose and Politics and Prose up on Connecticut Avenue, up by UDC at HBCU. So I would strongly encourage you all, don't leave town without getting that book. Don't leave town without getting that book. I give it that kind of read to it. But if you don't know the history, you won't know where we're going. If you don't have a sense of why HBCUs were even started. For my holidays this past year, I took a trip to the South. I said, okay, I read about Martin Luther King. I read about Stokely Carmichael. I read about all of that. So I decided to get in my car and drive, and I stopped at Tuskegee University, and really saw the work of Carter G. Woodson and Booker T. Washington, and man, it blows you away, because the history is right there on you, and I'm afraid that a lot of us are forgetting that history. We're thinking that it's back then, but back then is right now, That's one of the messages I want to leave to you. But I fully endorse the effort. I think Kabena is doing an excellent job. He's a straight up, he's a straight up young man, and there's a lot of young people now are standing up, and I think that, Ambassador, you're giving a lot of opportunity. I'm certainly endorsing him. A lot of the young ones standing up, and that's old guard, and I'm not that old. I run 4 or 5 miles a day. So don't call me old. Don't call me no elder. But if you look at the history, you better know that you're going to leave here one day, and if we don't pass it on, we're going to have to reinvent ourselves. And I know when I came along, there was Leon Sullivan, there was Randall Robinson, C. Payne Lucas was my boss at Africare for many years, Dorothy Height. We had all these giants out there, but they didn't do a good job of passing it on. They were icons themselves. They were pioneers. Brilliant people. Sullivan was like a conquering lion of Judah. That guy could, But I'm determined that we're going to pass on the knowledge that we have now to this next generation. Lessons learned. I'm working on my book. Some of you will be in that book, Ambassador. Some of you will be in that book. And but part of the book I wanted to be sort of a mentor book for the next generation. Lessons learned, mistakes made, success over here, and be careful over there. That kind of a thing. But so I'm excited. So I just want to thank you all for doing this. But it got to be some substance, some meat on the bone. Here in Washington, we get a lot of talk. You get talk. And one of the things I know Ambassador is committed to is that, we actually do some of these things we're talking about doing, that we can actually go and walk in the building, we can actually go and see the program, we can actually see the business that's been developed. We want to do it while we're living. That's right. And we don't want to leave this for sometime down the road. So thank you very much for what you're doing. I'm certainly a partner here. I want to support it any way I can. And I just wish you all well. The time is now for Africa and for African people. Inshallah. How are you?
All right. What a great day indeed. A day of education, call to action. We have no excuses, no reasons not to plug into something today that can outlive us. We thank all the great speakers, everyone that have come out, they've spoken with passion. What is so unique about this media chat is action. People are ready to take action. People are committing, and they are not committing for lip service. Because if you're dealing with Madam Ambassador Chihombori, she's real. She's not about talk shop. She's about action. And everyone that have spoken from a position of what they can do now, not what they're going to think about. And I charge all of us to follow up, to find it in our heart, to see how can we collaborate? How can we make our Africa become what it used to be and better again? And we should all give our genius, don't leave, Kwame, we want to give him a round of applause for birthing such a laudable initiative that he has pulled so many great men and women of stature globally to be part of this. Hats off to you, brother. When we talk about talk, action to back it up is what gets me excited. So I am super excited and honored to be part of today. Madam Ambassador, none of this would have happened without you. We're not tooting your horn, but you're doing the work. And finally, we're thankful that we have someone who is truly doing the work. So it makes all of us not to stand back and be looking. We can't be onlookers anymore. You got somebody who will support you. Just bring forth the idea. Do the work. Don't just talk it, do it. You got the support. The African Union is there to support each and every one of us. And I'm saying that she has supported so many initiatives. A lot of people would not support things like this. But she knows that if Africa is meant to be what we want it to be, all of us have to bring our genius, bring our greatness, and align it with the powers to be, which is what she represents for 55 African nations. Thank you all so much. I'm honored to be part of this history, and you've energized me to move forward and be greater. Thank you.
You want to check out Roland Unfiltered? youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.